Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Charles Saint-Anan has given us a excellent review of where Canada's gone wrong and what our challenges are. I think we need some solutions, and so I want to suggest a few. So, number one, I do think that the Macdonald-Royal Commission back in the 1980s was extremely helpful, and the fact that it was started by a Liberal government and led by a Liberal former finance minister, Donald MacDonald, but then was implemented and reviewed and then implemented by a Conservative government, I think was extremely helpful. And so given our current state of the polls, I think that Justin Trudeau, the current Prime Minister, should initiate immediately a Royal Commission on the economy. Whether that report will be received by him and his government or by a future Conservative government, the way it looks like right now, I don't think is relevant. I think that it's the right thing to do, and it might actually be better if Pierre Poilievre, who it looks like may be the next Prime Minister of Canada, actually received a report that was commissioned by and initiated by a party of a different stripe prior to his election, rather than it coming at the same time as him coming to power, if that's what's to happen. So that's number one. And I do think that the 26 volumes, the across the country reviews and interviews and feedback sessions that the Macdonald-Royal Commission convened was extremely helpful in reviewing what the challenges Canada had and really coming to a consensus that dramatic changes in the economy were critical. And it's hard to remember how critically important today that Royal Commission was in the 1980s and leading up to then the free trade election in 1988. So that's number one. Number two, to just get to some things thinking, I think that what Charles talked about, what I've talked about previously, this unbelievable length of time it takes to get anything approved, whether it's a house or a condo or a mine or a pipeline, is atrocious. The fact that it takes 5 to 7 years to get a house approved, a condo approved, longer to get a mine or a pipeline approved, red tape and regulation is choking off investment. Talk about people not wanting to put dollars, international people not wanting to put dollars at risk in Canada. It's because of the risk associated with regulation and the time it takes to get even a no answer. We have to dramatically reduce it. So I think we need to have a radical reduction in regulation, in a radical amount of deregulation. Clinton, when he was president of the United States, had a red tape commission or a get rid of red tape commission that was led by the vice president, Al Gore. And I think that was critical to improving the climate for investment in the United States at the time. And we need that in Canada today. I think number two, we need to right-size the public service. I don't think we need to do that immediately. I think that when a prior candidate for Premier of Ontario had recommended that, they didn't get elected because 100,000 or so public servants in Ontario thought they were going to lose their jobs. And I don't think that's right for people to change careers and uproot families and take occupations, and then all of a sudden on a political whim have their life changed like that. That said, attrition is got to be the way that it's accomplished, and it's got to be done right away from an attrition standpoint to reduce the public service. There's no reason why the public service should be growing at substantially higher rates than the private sector and taking a far greater share of GDP. I think that we need to make some investments, and I think that there's three places that investments need to take place. Number one, we need to invest in the military. If there was ever a time in our history since World War II where it made sense to invest in the military, is number one, when we've got wars in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East, and potentially something that's brewing in the Pacific or South Asia. Now is the time to do it. Arctic sovereignty is an issue. China and Russia are spending vast sums of money in Arctic areas, if not in our Arctic areas, and we need to ensure Arctic sovereignty. And we've got, whether Trump is elected in the United States or not, a pressure to spend the 2% of GDP, which we've committed to. So why the heck aren't we actually living up to our commitments? And so I think that we should be investing in the military. I think we need to invest in housing. And not in house prices, but in housing. And the way that you make sure that we invest in increasing our housing stock rather than just bidding up the price of existing houses is by, number one, increasing the supply And the best way to increase the supply, I believe, is by number one, reducing regulation and the time to get approvals, which we've already talked about. And number two, decreasing dramatically the taxes and fees associated with getting new housing developed. And I think we should eliminate, for right now, if not, frankly, in the medium term, development fees and GST on new housing construction. We need to radically get something going within the housing sector to get building built again, and we need to incentivize increased productivity there. And I think by reducing the cost of new housing, such that we increase the supply, it'll keep housing prices, even with lower interest rates, from increasing. Now, I don't think they'll bring them down all that much, but it'll make sure that they don't go up, which will mean that there'll be less of an interest in bidding prices up because the chance for appreciation will go down. But we do need more affordability, and we need more housing stock. And then the third place that we need investment is in productive assets. Charles talked about this as critically important, that we invest far less in productive assets, R&D, in manufacturing, in productivity than other countries in the G7, in the OECD, etc. And I'm not sure how to do that, but I've got one suggestion, and that is through flow-through taxes. Flow-through taxes, flow-through shares, and I think it should be available for private companies as well as public companies, are a way of effectively taking the tax deduction today that you're going to get anyway in the future, because what you're doing is you're deducting against a person's personal income the cost of investment or the cost of expenses associated with R&D or new development that you would have gotten to deduct corporately in the future anyway. So all you're really doing is you're not losing tax revenue. You're just losing that tax revenue. You're allowing that tax revenue to be deducted against income earlier on, which gives an incentive for people to invest in productive assets, gives an incentive for people to do new exploration. And so I think those flow-through shares should be extended from mining into, frankly, all areas of productive investment. So I think it should be mines. I think it should be forestry. I think it should be pharmaceuticals. I think it should be biotech. I think it should be IT. I think it should be green tech, etc. And I think that that would make Canada a very attractive place for people to put investment. And if you knew that, number one, the time for approval had been reduced, and I'm not saying, allow everything to proceed. I think you still need smart environmental regulations. Just get it done a lot quicker. And there's no reason why we can't have that happen. But review quickly, approve things that should get approved, and allow people to deduct against their taxation the expenses that they would have deducted corporately in a few years anyway, so that you get the benefit up front, which reduces the effective cost of the investment, reduces the risk, and gets people investing in productive assets, such that we can make Canada a great place to make investment. And then one final controversial issue is, I do think that the future is going to be based on a green economy. And so how do you induce best people to invest in both consumers demanding green or carbon-free or carbon-freer goods, and how do you get companies to make investment in that area? I think it is a carbon tax. Axe the tax has become a rallying cry. I think that the stupidest thing that Stephen Harper did was reduce the GST by 2 points. It was politically popular, but it was dumb. It was dumb economics. It was dumb fiscal policy. Brian Mulroney, the former prime minister, once told me at a wedding, the smartest thing he did economically was put in the GST. The dumbest thing is the way he did it politically. He says the dumbest thing Stephen Harper did economically was take off 2 points, but it was a smart political thing. Sometimes we need leaders that don't do political things, but actually do really smart long-term economic things. And I think the carbon tax is a very smart long-term economic thing, because number one, it'll get people to invest in investments, companies, technologies, opportunities that will create a far more green economy in the future, and it'll incentivize you and I to buy the goods that come from that area. And then I think finally, and frankly, most importantly, is what we need is just an attitude that says that productivity, prosperity, growth are important. And just redistribution is not. And it comes back to this attitude of we just don't want to carve the pie up. We want to grow the pie. And we need to have a business orientation. We need to have an economically growth orientation at the highest level in politics and government, in business, that is saying this is the right thing for Canada long term. We want to have growing real wages, real incomes. And the only way to do that is through productivity and prosperity. Anyway, a couple of thoughts from me on what we need to do with the Canadian economy. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your attention.